Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Ann Glazer-Nyren, and I am the curator of Jewish collections here at the Filson Historical Society. Thank you so much for joining us for this program this evening, which is held in partnership with the Kentucky Opera. I'd like to remind everyone to please silence your cell phones for the duration of the program, and any recording of the opera performance tonight is strictly prohibited. And now to introduce our panel. This year, Rabbi Stan Miles celebrates the 50th anniversary of his ordination. He served as a congregational rabbi for 41 years, 38 of them at Temple Shalom in Louisville. Currently, he volunteers here at the Filson and teaches the history of anti-Semitism in the Melton Adult Education Program at Congregation Adath Jeshurun. Daniel Penner is a graduate of Western Kentucky University. He taught in the Jefferson County school system for 47 years. And at Atherton High School, he started year-long class on the Holocaust, which is probably the first one in Kentucky. Dan became a teacher fellow with the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in 2003. Frederick Whittaker is a science and Holocaust teacher based in Louisville, Kentucky. Dedicated to raising awareness about the Holocaust, he successfully led a 13-year-long interfaith, interage community effort to lobby for mandated Holocaust education in Kentucky schools. Outside of his professional life, he is a proud father and an owner of 2 amazing cats. American baritone Morgan Smith is one of the most prolific performers of modern operatic repertoire in the world. Known for his riveting dramatic portrayals and the power and beauty of his voice, Mr. Smith has been entrusted to create 16 roles in world premieres, including Starbuck and Jake Hegge's widely celebrated Moby Dick, as well as earning universal praise in performances of numerous roles in the traditional repertoire, such as Scarpia, Tosca, Escamillo, Carmen, and Count Almaviva in Le Nozze di Figaro. In addition, he created the title role in the Tony Kushner, Maurice Sendak adaptation of Hans Krause's children's opera, Brundabar, recorded by Naxos. And last but certainly not least, we welcome students from St. Francis of Assisi. Thank you so much, and let us begin.
Thank you, Anne. Appreciate the welcome. It's really an honor here to stand with my respected colleagues, Dan Penner and Rabbi Miles. Their wisdom has shaped and shepherded so many generations of students. I'm really humbled to speak here with them at the Filson Historical Society. It's definitely a place that understands history as sacred ground. Remembering is never passive, we all know. It is always active, a moral act. Tonight, we honor a fragile and urgent memory of the Holocaust. I've been asked to help center us on ideas that define this history, a time which witnessed humanity at its worst, and in so many examples of heroism, defiance, and resilience at its very best. In our day, its relevance only grows, for we live in times when anti-Semitism is rising everywhere, when forgetting has gained momentum, while denial and distortion grow only stronger. Today, we live in a world still shaped by genocide and targeted violence, and still resistant to the lessons of the Holocaust. The Holocaust is very well documented. We think we know its history, but precisely because of that, we must keep gathering around it, never taking its voice and wisdom for granted, never leaving its telling to someone else, being committed always to the sacred task of memory. I speak as a Catholic Holocaust educator who once faced a very painful truth: Christian anti-Semitism, darkness engendered by my own faith tradition, helped to lay the groundwork for Nazi hatred. Early in my career as an educator, I felt called into that wound, not to fix the unfixable, but to offer a thread of healing for the future. For decades, I've walked this path with students who are eager to understand what it means to be human, to be responsible, to be courageous and just. Through them, I've come to believe profoundly in the redemptive power of teaching this history. We call this history the Holocaust. We invoke the imagery of fire and flames, not for poetic precision, but out of desperation, for even after 80 years of searching, we have found no words better to describe this failure of humanity. How else can we describe a world where human lives fell from the sky as ash? How else can we speak of a universe that mandated the murder of children? How do we understand the souls of good people who stood by as their neighbors were carried off into the flames and chose to do nothing to help them? Now, in the 80th year since the liberation of the camps, we work not just to remember the victims, we remember the silence, the complicity, the cold indifference that allowed it all to burn. The Holocaust did not begin with gas chambers. It began with words, whispers, rumors, laws, lies that engulfed the hearts of people as normal as you and me. It began with scapegoats, with people who were labeled them or illegal. It began with fear dressed as patriotism. This is the story of how civilized people gave themselves permission to hate and to be indifferent in the name of their own safety and security. And this is why we must remember, not just the facts, but the failure, not just the numbers, but the numbness. We must study how people learned not to see, not to feel, not to act, so that in our times we are not paralyzed and blind to those who call out to us for refuge. For 13 years, I stood beside my students as we worked to pass a bill that would require Holocaust education in every school in Kentucky. I watched successive classes of 8th graders step into this effort and learning. Students were always cautious, unsure why we began our year in a place of such darkness. But something always happened in these young people. The more they learned, the more their hearts opened. They stopped asking what happened and began to ask, how could it happen? And more importantly, they asked, what will I become? What will I do now that I know? There are lessons in their hearts. These are the lessons that they carry, and these are the lessons that the Shoah urgently asks us all to remember. They learned that hatred must be chaperoned. It is taught, justified, made normal by people who seem safe and sane. They learned to question authority, to be suspicious of slogans, to be watchful of laws that slowly strip away rights and dignity. They learn that people will massage their prejudice and hate until they can hold its fire in their hearts and still sleep comfortably at night. They understand that anti-Semitism is not confined to the past. Yes, Jewish people died at Auschwitz because of anti-Semitism, but the anti-Semitism which catalyzed their destruction survived its flames. They recognize that indifference is complicity, a steadfast partner of hate. It creates a space in which the vulnerable can become evicted from society, a silence in which their anguish is no longer heard, a darkness where any terror can occur. In the face of indifference, my Holocaust students ask, why am I silent? Why do I look away? They learn that their voices matter, that all of our voices matter, that silence protects the powerful, but speech protects the vulnerable. They begin to see themselves as moral agents, able to offset and defy, with tiny sparks of compassion and courage, the other flickers of unkindness and prejudice, which, when left unopposed, can combine into the flames that create genocide. These are not just abstract lessons. They define who these students are becoming and what kind of world they hope to shape together with us. Several years ago, my students and I stood in the Hall of Remembrance at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. We had walked for hours through rooms filled with the echoes and whispers of a living, painful history. But it was in standing in the silence before the eternal flame that the lessons that this place had to teach us became wisdom. Cantor David Lipp joined us. He raised his voice in prayer, the ancient Hebrew words of El Maleh Rachamim rising in the hall, made from memory. My students stood in reverent silence. The sound of Cantor's voice slowly rose and filled the room with light and goodness. We prayed together for the souls of 6 million, for the world they left behind, for those who suffer today, and for the strength to be changed by what we had witnessed. My students wept, and then they did something I'll never forget. One by one, they reached out, not to each other, not to me, but to God. In whispered prayers of their own, they connected the history they had learned to the lives they now vowed to live. There were no speeches, no performance, no slogans, just stillness, reverence, and resolve. In that moment, the Holocaust was not history, it was moral responsibility. That is why we must remember and teach it, because the Shoah is not just a story of death. It is a call to life, to the lives we live today, that they might be made of courage, compassion, and conscience, the kind that creates refuge for those who seek safety, a home for those who have been abandoned by the world, and a circle of belonging for those who have been pushed to its edges and forgotten. May it be that in our work and in our remembering that we bring blessing and meaning to those whose lives were so tragically cut short in the Shoah. In just a moment, we'll be hearing from Dan Penner about Terezín and about Brundibar, the children's opera that was spun defiantly in the deepest shadow of the Holocaust. Let us remember it and the Holocaust rightly. Let us teach and be changed by the wisdom this history contains. Thank you for having me.
Let's go back in time. It's 1933, specifically April of 1933. As of the 30th of January, 1933, Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany, and he was turning it into the Third Reich. The first orchestrated act of the Hitler government against German Jewry was very simple. It was simply a one-day boycott of Jewish businesses in Germany. It was obvious. Pictures of the boycott, of stormtroopers standing in front of desecrated stores, appeared in newspapers around the world. Motion pictures of the boycott were present in theaters, in newsreels. And the world wondered, what, if anything, do we do? The Jewish community wondered, what, if anything, do we do as well? The world of Jewry thought, by and large, that we would follow the path that we have followed for well over a millennium. When facing prejudice, anti-Semitism, we don't do anything. We don't make waves. Because if we make waves, if we fight against them, it will only get worse. In the United States and America, what do we do? Became a burning issue for the American Jewish community. Conventional wisdom, indeed the wisdom of many national Jewish organizations in this country, was just that. Shh. We don't want to do anything because we will only make them angrier. Now, I have a question. If you are in our audience here at the Filson Society tonight, and you are a member of the National Council of Jewish Women, Louisville section, would you kindly raise your hands? Thank you. I must say to you, thank you. because of all of the organizations in Louisville, Kentucky, the National Council of Jewish Women Louisville section, also known as NCJW, followed the move of their courageous national organization to try to mount a counter boycott of the Third Reich in 1933. And by and large, they did. They made a counter boycott of German businesses in the United States of America. It was tough. Now, it wasn't that the world didn't know what was coming. Hitler wrote Mein Kampf back in the 1920s when he was in prison for treason in Landsberg prison. And in Mein Kampf, if you could get through it, you knew exactly what he planned to do. In the world we live in today, there are many, many counter boycotts in the world. It wasn't like that in 1933. But the National Council of Jewish Women knew what was going to happen. They knew that the path could only lead from boycott to genocide. And they went beyond the Jewish community. They approached the Kentucky Federation of Women's Clubs located in Frankfort, Kentucky. And they asked their sister organizations throughout our Commonwealth to also help in this endeavor. I wish I could tell you what happened, but their research hasn't appeared yet. It's out there. But they didn't stop there. They started in early 1938 a German children's project to rescue Jewish children from Nazi Germany, to bring them to Louisville, Kentucky, and help acculturate them. Key word, early. This German children's project was almost half a year prior to Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, November 9th and 10th, 1938, when the world couldn't turn away and the destruction was there. NCJW also brought over families, refugee families from Germany. They secured apartments for the newcomers, furnished these apartments, conducted English classes about the American home, teaching new Americans how to function in a supermarket. A nursery school they established in what was the Jewish Children's Home and is the forerunner to the Home of the Innocents today. A difference for good was made here in our hometown in Louisville, Kentucky. A difference for good that was remembered 30 years later. We did it again in the early 1970s, rescuing thousands and thousands of Jews from the Soviet Union. We are part of a world community, my friends. And we, through organizations like NCJW Louisville section, made a small difference for good.
Good evening, folks. Tough acts to follow, actually. But, I'm going to kind of focus on the actual Terezín, which is what Brundabar and the opera is going to be centering on in a couple of weeks. First off, Terezín is located about 30 miles north of Prague, which was then the Czechoslovakia. It actually, ironically, was first a holiday resort for the Czech nobility. Nonetheless, it did become a ghetto, and one might ask, well, why was there ghettos? Well, this is Hitler's doing. He wanted to set up some communities near big cities, near railroad lines, to separate Jews. And actually, it was a temporary solution to the Jewish problem, which was a major focus, if not the major focus, of the Nazi system. And that was to make the Nazi territories, Nazi regime, Judenrein, Jew-free. So they set up these ghettos where, this was all by design, that people would be due to hard labor, starvation, diseases, they would die. And Hitler was very happy to know that they would die in great numbers and rather quickly. Okay. So as far as Terezín, it was set up as a transit camp, and that was to send its inhabitants to labor camps, concentration camps, death camps. Okay, so just throw some numbers. About 155,000 people came through the gates of Terezín. Of that 155,000, about 35,000 died in the ghetto itself. Another 80,000+ were sent to death camps or concentration camps where they died. And there were also 15,000 children at Terezín. And of those 15,000 children, 100 survived. None under the age of 14. So why is Terezín a focus of our attention? We'll get, first off, it was a very rich cultural center. Theater, art, music, a library of more than 60,000 volumes. Very important. And not other ghettos had some of the same characteristics, but Terezín has gotten a lot more focus. And also a lot of children's art came from Terezín. A lady by the name of Frieda Brandeis from Vienna came and started an art program at Terezín. And they came up with, there's probably 5,000 poems, pieces of art that existed from these children. But for the children, it was important for two things. One is it was a form of resistance. It was also gave them some hope that might have a future. Okay. And to kind of put it in the words of one of the children, his name is Peter Fagel. So the kids got used to things like not having a bed, being slapped around, abused without any reason. They would have to salute anybody in a uniform. And also they would see piles of coffins with corpses in them. Peter Fagel died at 15 at Auschwitz, but this is what he saw in his time in Terezín. So another focus on what we want to talk about is that Terezín kind of exemplified the Nazis' use of deception. Actually, it was almost advertised as a place for elderly German Jews to come, like a spa town. Also, it'd be there a haven of sorts after the war was over. And actually, people were duped to think they actually bought tickets to come to Terezín, sold their property to try to get money to come to Terezín. But another thing that came out of that is a propaganda. So people had an idea of the ghettos throughout Poland especially were really horrendous, nasty places. So try to diffuse this idea, the Nazis invited the International Red Cross to come to Terezín to inspect it. Okay, so before the Red Cross showed up, they did some work around Terezín. They painted buildings. They planted flowers. They reconstructed the barracks. They put in a playground, a swimming pool, cafe, a bank. Okay, so when the Red Cross came, they would be convinced that things are not as what we've been told. And so they had some of the inhabitants of Terezín were forced to role play during this 6-hour visit by the Red Cross. So they did arts and crafts. Kids played games. They had a soccer match that a crowd developed to watch that. Okay. And this was all put on film by the Nazis. The film was called "They Gave the Führer a City." Right. We're going to show a little clip from this behind me here. Among the things that was presented there are
Alleinstehende Frauen und Mädchen machen es sich in ihrer Frauenheit gemütlich.
In contrast to reality, the Nazi propaganda film of 1944 shows women being quartered in a residential hut. It does not show the horribly overfilled barracks and attics where most of the inmates lived, only those sleeping quarters specially prepared for the film. Instead of the omnipresent 3-tiered bunks, one sees only 2-tiered bunks. The top bed has been removed for the filming. Where in reality 20 people squatted round a table, were now sat only 6, apparently enjoying a life of leisure in the style of a feature movie. To make it all seem less overcrowded, the SS had created space by deporting several thousand inmates to Auschwitz. The film simply does not convey how the inmates really experienced.
As Dan mentioned, Terezín was a place of great terror and horror and darkness. To study the Holocaust is to understand that in that place there was great defiance. It is a myth and a lie to believe that no one defied. There was armed resistance, but in a place of death, to pray is defiance. To insist on life is defiance. To insist on beauty is defiance. To write poetry is defiance. This evening we have some students from St. Francis of Assisi who will be reading poetry written by children in the Terezín.
And before they start, you're going to see some of the artwork from children created in Terezín while they're doing this.
On a sunny evening, anonymous 1944, written by the children in barracks L318 and L417, ages 10 to 16 years. On a purple, sunshot evening, under wide, flowering chestnut trees, upon the threshold full of dust, yesterday, today, the days are all like these. Trees flower forth in beauty, lovely too their very wood, all gnarled and old, that I am half afraid to peer into their crowns of green and gold. The sun has made a veil of gold, so lovely that my body aches. Above the heavens shriek with blue, convinced I've smiled by some mistake. The world's abloom and seems to smile. I want to fly, but where, how high? If in barbed wire things can bloom, why couldn't I? I will not die. Poem by Franta Bass, 13 years old. I am a Jew and will be a Jew forever. Even if I should die from hunger, never will I submit. I will always fight for my people, on my honor. I will never be ashamed of them. I give my word. I am proud of my people, how dignified they are. Even though I am suppressed, I will always come back to life.
A Letter to Daddy by Anonymous. Mama told me to write to you today, but I had no time. New children arrived with the latest transport, and I had to play with them. I didn't notice time pass. I live better these days. I sleep on my own mattress on the floor, so I will not fall down. At least I don't have much work to fix up my bed, and in the morning I see the sky from my window. I was coughing a bit, but I don't want to get sick, for I am happy when I can run in the courtyard. Tonight there will be a gathering like the ones at scout camp in the summer. We will sing songs we know. A girl will play the accordion. I know you wonder how we fare here, and you would surely like to be with us now. And something else, Daddy. Come soon and have a more cheerful face. When you are unhappy, Mama is sad. And then I miss the sparkle in her eyes. You promised to bring me books, because, truly, I have nothing to read. So please, come tomorrow, right before dusk. I will surely be grateful for this. Now I must stop. Mama sends you her love. I will rejoice when I hear your footsteps in the hall. Until you are with us again, I send you my greetings and kisses, your faithful son.
Terezín by Hannes Hockenberg, 1944. That bit of filth and dirty walls, and all around barbed wire, and 30,000 souls who sleep, who once will wake, and once will see their own blood spilled. I once was a little child, 3 years ago, that child who longed for other worlds. But now I am no more a child, for I have learned to hate. I am a grown-up person now. I have known fear. Bloody words and a dead day then, that's something different than boogeymen. But anyway, I still believe I only sleep today, that I'll wake up a child again and start to laugh and play. I'll go back to childhood sweet like a briar rose, like a bell that wakes us from a dream, like a mother with an ailing child, loves him with aching woman's love. How tragic, then, is youth that lives, loves with enemies, with gallows ropes. How tragic, then, for children on your lap to say, this for the good, that for the bad. Somewhere, far away out there, childhood sweetly sleeps, along that path among the trees, there o'er that house, that was once my pride and joy. There my mother gave me birth into this world, so I could weep. In the flame of candles by my bed I sleep, and once perhaps I'll understand that I was such a little thing, as little as this song. These 30,000 souls who sleep among the trees will wake, open an eye, and because they see a lot, they'll fall asleep again.
Terezín by Myth, 1944. The heaviest wheel rolls across our foreheads to bury itself deep somewhere inside our memories. We've suffered here more than enough, here in this clot of grief and shame, wanting a badge of blindness to be a proof for their own children. A fourth year of waiting, like standing above a swamp, from which any moment might gush forth a spring. Meanwhile, the rivers flow another way, not letting you die, not letting you live. And the cannons don't scream, and the guns don't bark, and you don't see blood here. Nothing, only hunger. Children steal the bread here and ask and ask and ask, and all would wish to sleep, keep silent, and just to go to sleep again. The heaviest wheel rolls across our foreheads to bury itself deep inside our memories. The Butterfly by Pavel Friedman, 1942. The last, the very last, so richly, brightly, dazzlingly yellow. Perhaps, if the sun's tears would sing against a white stone, such a yellow is carried lightly way up high. It went away, I'm sure, because it wished to kiss the world goodbye. For 7 weeks, I've lived here, penned up inside this ghetto. But I have found what I love here. The dandelions call to me, and the white chestnut branches in the court. Only, I never saw another butterfly. The butterfly was the last one. Butterflies don't live here in the ghetto.
We now welcome Morgan Smith and Alan Gubo.
We're going to welcome back the from St. Francis for the next part of the program.
Rafi Hertzsommer. Rafi Hertzsommer was born in Prague in 1937 to a famous mother, Alice Hertzsommer, who was a classical pianist. When he was only 6 years old, he was sent to Terezín, where his mother worked hard to protect him. In the opera Brundibar, he played the sparrow. After the war, Rafi and his mother moved to Israel, where he studied the cello. He also became a teacher and concert performer, is both a sought-after speaker and writer. He died of an aneurysm in 2001 while on a concert tour in Tel Aviv. Ivan Fink. Ivan Fink was born on March 5, 1938 in Prague. He was sent to Terezín on May 7, 1943, and transported to Auschwitz on October 23, 1944, where he was murdered.
Gertruda Eisenderova. Gertruda Eisenderova was born on December 27, 1931, in Prague. At the age of 10, she was sent to Terezín on July 16, 1942. From there, she was transported to Auschwitz on October 23, 1944, where she was murdered. Avelio Katz. Avelio Katz was born on November 4, 1932. Then on July 13, 1943, he was sent to Terezín. His art teacher commented on what a sweet boy he was, but after a short time in Terezín, he became bitter and violent. Avelio Katz was transported to Auschwitz on December 18, 1943, where he was murdered soon after his 12th birthday.
Ella Stein Weisberger. Ella Stein Weisberger was born in the former Czechoslovakia in 1930. 12 years later, she was shipped off to Terezín, along with her mother, grandmother, and sister. In Brundibar, she played the role of the cat. Because of Brundibar's revival, she had the opportunity to tell her story all over the world. Ella died in 2018. Greta Hofmeister. Greta Hofmeister was born in Vienna in 1929. Her parents left on a ship for Palestine, and so Greta and her sister went to an orphanage in Brna, Czechoslovakia. Their parents tried to get them out, but immigration from many countries was now closed, so all of the children in the orphanage were sent to Terezín in 1942. Greta played Annika in Brundibar. In 1944, she and her sister were sent to Auschwitz, where her sister was murdered. Greta was then sent to Terezín. After the war, she settled in Palestine, where she became a professional singer. Greta then died in 2022.
Jewish memorial prayers are rather peculiar, my friends. Our memorial prayers usually don't mention death. What they do, they thank God for the gift of life and the gifts of the lives we remember. This is a special memorial prayer in English, for those who perished in the Holocaust. Creator of all, source and shelter, grant a perfect rest under your tabernacle of peace to those who perished in the Holocaust, our fathers and mothers, our sisters and brothers, our rabbis and teachers, our neighbors and children, the named and the unnamed, whose lives were cut off by brutal, vicious, cunning, and calculated violence. May they find peace in the world to come. Remember the survivors who have since passed away, and the virtues of our people who've died at the hand of malice in every generation. We remember the works of their hands and the messages of their hearts. Bless the defenders of our people with safety and strength, and the righteous of all nations who provide protection, shelter, and comfort to us. Let their deeds be a source of favor in heaven and healing on earth. Put an end to anger, hatred, and fear, and lead us to a time when no one will suffer at the hand of another, speedily in our days. May the memories of all who faced these horrors be sanctified with joy and love. May their souls be bound up in the bond of life, a living blessing in our midst, and let us together say, Amen.
At this time, we'll take some questions from the folks assembled here, people on Zoom. Kelly in the back is going to be running around with a microphone. So we've got a question right here in the front.
As the son of a Holocaust survivor who was in Theresienstadt concentration camp and was freed in May of 1945, I appreciate this very much, and we should never forget, and this is one way of doing it.
I know this is kind of a question that I guess from a curious person who's not Jewish, but of all the concentration camps, and this one was, my understanding, they had 3 full orchestras. Am I correct? They had writers and poets. It was really an unusual place. I guess my question is, did anybody ever escape from this terrible concentration camp? Does anybody have any history of that?
It was a fortress that was actually located outside of the ghetto area, and it was there. It was built mostly for Czech resistance, among others. I think there's some POWs there, but I'm sure some people survived it. They were not totally, annihilated. I don't have any particular numbers for this. Again, that's separate from the ghetto, the concentration camp.
Thank you.
When did the American people become aware of what was going on here and the other camps throughout the Poland and Germany, et cetera?
I wrote a paper 50 years ago examining the coverage of the Nazi killing of Jews as reported by the New York Times from 1942 through 1943. we knew all along what was happening. There were small articles that came out of Europe that were published in the Times. What made these articles different than the other articles in the paper? Very few of them, if were ever on the front page of the New York Times, they were in the back of the paper, and very, very few of them had bylines, but everything from where the death camps were to the times the trains arrived at the death camps. And I remember one article in particular talking about 80,000 Jews being shipped from Salonika to the death camp at Auschwitz. So anyone who could read a newspaper would know exactly what was happening and where it was happening.
And I can add to this, Roosevelt, Churchill, the Pope had information as well. So it was not like it was unknown. As far as reaching the public, and of course, a lot of things got buried, I know, in our State Department. There were even talks one time of bombing Auschwitz, but they put the war effort ahead of saving lives, and that's just what happened.
The irony was the synthetic rubber camp at Auschwitz was bombed, but the death camp never was.
We ask, when did they know? And another part of that is when did we believe? And another part of that is when did we feel? And you could say that we're still learning how to feel the Holocaust. If you go to the United States Holocaust Memorial today, it starts on the 4th floor. And many of us in the room, I'm sure, have gone. There's a huge image of the Gurs concentration camp. And it's a sad and terrible image to look at. It is the attempt, it is a pile of bodies that have been incinerated on top of railroad tracks. And it was an attempt by the Nazis to get rid of what they considered evidence of their war crimes. When the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum opened up, or was preparing to open up, they put out a call to soldiers and to liberators, do you have artifacts? What do you have for our museum that we could display? And the picture that's on the wall there, they got one, and then they got another, and another, and another, and they were identical. It seemed like thousands of soldiers had this picture. And the story behind it is that Eisenhower himself went to Gurs and saw what the soldiers were seeing and realized instantaneously that it was beyond comprehension and that it was going to be really hard to explain, to believe, and feel. And so he ordered pictures taken, and then he had them distributed to soldiers who were going home. And he said specifically, show people what you saw and tell them it happened. And I tell my students when we arrive there, we're still gathering around that picture, telling people what happened and hoping that they can believe and feel.
Oh, I was just wondering, is there any reading or a book that goes into more detail about this particular ghetto and the history behind it that you're aware of?
Yeah. Well, this is something actually I use in the class. I've used in the classroom. It's a book that has art and poetry, some of which I'm sure these students read tonight. It talks about the history, a little bit about Terezín. It's mostly about the kids' art and their poetry. But this is something that I could recommend. I hope that even the library might have it. It's called I Never Saw Another Butterfly. Okay, sure.
I actually have just the beginnings of a bibliography here, and it would take me way too long to go through it. U of L has a number of wonderful not photos, but works of the children's art. That's where I got some of these, including I Never Saw Another Butterfly, the Jewish Reading Room in the Ekstrom Library has a number of wonderful things. So if you are really interested, it would take me too long to name all of them, but I can certainly, between the four of us, I'm sure we would have a lot to compile.
There's a wonderful Holocaust museum at the Cincinnati Museum Center. The ongoing exhibition there is terrific because it is a microcosmic exhibit. It deals with people who survived the Holocaust and resettled and rebuilt their lives in Cincinnati, Ohio. But this fall, beginning at the end of October, there will be an incredible traveling exhibit there for several months. And the exhibit is called Auschwitz, Not So Long Ago, Not So Far Away. That will be absolutely worth a trip to Cincinnati, Ohio.
I think we have time for one more question. I saw Lauren's hand up.
I've always wondered about Terezín, about the Red Cross coming up one day. And I understand there's a whole history, a Red Cross history, and Germany not allowing a German Red Cross anymore, and all kinds of stuff like that. How was it really possible that they were fully Jews? How did that happen?
Honestly, Lauren, I think that sadly people close their eyes to reality. They don't want to, people do not want to believe the worst.
Yeah, just one footnote on that. They eventually apologized for not saying anything. This is obviously after the fact, so it doesn't hold a whole lot of water, but they did realize that they did know much and did not share it or make it public or internationally known.
We have one more question here in the back. He's been trying to get in since the first.
I just think it's important to remember that Louisville has a very direct connection to the children of Theresienstadt in the art world, in that the principal violinist for the Louisville Orchestra in the late 60s, early 70s, and I recall seeing him perform, Pavel Kling, or known in Louisville as Paul Kling, was a child prodigy and survivor of Theresienstadt or Terezín, who made his way to Louisville and had a fabulous performance career with the Louisville Orchestra. So there is a little bit of good that landed here in addition to what Stanley suggested from the National Council of Jewish Women. So just to recognize that.
All right. I will say for the sake of time that if you have further questions and you would like to ask our panelists, you can certainly stay after. I want to say thank you so much to Dan and Stan and Fred and to Morgan and Alan and to our students from St. Francis and to all of you for being here tonight for this very important discussion. Thank you.